right. Before we begin, I just really wanted to put emphasis on the fact that I've been following the Q movement for, I don't know, maybe a little over 3 years, and I want to, without a doubt, just iterate that the Q movement does not condone violence, or does not promote violence, is what I'm trying to say. It does not say to go out and do vigilante justice. It never has condoned or pushed that kind of activity before. And there's a lot of fake news that's out there that likes to tie these people that are just crazy, and they might believe in Q and the movement, but they go out and they do their own, so to speak, vigilante justice, or just cause havoc or mayhem, and they are a representative of what we would call a shill, somebody that's completely against what we stand for. If you are a believer in the Q movement, now that's the problem. Is a lot of people try to jump into Q, especially these mainstream journalists, and they don't have the time to read 3 years worth of material that's been posted, and so they just make generalizations, fake claims, anything to kind of stir up the fear. And I wanted to just stress that point before we get into this. If the values of Q believes in, First Amendment, the Constitution, equality for all, and the thing is, it's been misrepresented by the news completely. And so I just wanted to start off by that. This is your host, Leon, with the Rank and File show, or podcast. Not quite sure what I'm going to be titling this or making this, but since we do have visual elements, we'll probably just stick to a show. We'll be posting here on YouTube and on BitChute. We are also on, or I should say I am also on Twitter and Parler. You can find my tag below in the description, of course. Now, moving into what is Q. So let's be sure that we talk about this, because I've talked to a lot of friends that are giving me some constructive criticism on this show, and one of the things is I didn't really realize is that there's not a whole bunch of people that know about Q, or the QAnon movement, or phenomenon, whatever you'd like to call it. So I really wanted to dedicate an episode that's just about that, and so we can understand that. Now, I want to be also clear here, this show isn't dedicated for Q, or for Q posting, or deciphering his drops that he posts on 8chan. This show is dedicated to what our welcome video was all about when we introduced General Flynn in the welcome video. This show is more about bringing the truth to light. And that's represented in the symbol with the eagle, with the night vision, right, from dark to light. And our whole point is to be a show that talks about what a lot of people aren't talking about, especially on the mainstream media. And there is a second revolution, so to speak, that's not being covered in the mainstream media. And I really wanted to reiterate these points, or highlight these points, I mean. And so that's the whole point of my show. And I will be including elements from Q. I will be including elements from Russiagate, Obamagate, even Pizzagate. And so Q is just a part of the whole gigantic puzzle, and will be highlighted in a lot of the episodes. So I wanted to make this introduction episode on Q, so that way if I ever do bring him up, or her up, we don't really know, then you'll have a little bit of better understanding. And what better way to do this by also supporting somebody that's in the movement that I actually follow and look up to, so to speak. And that's none other than Neon Revolt. And of course, what we're looking at is his website at neonrevolt.com. And he's created an excellent piece called Who is QAnon? An Introduction to the QAnon Phenomenon, hashtag QAnon, hashtag Great Awakening. And this was actually written on July 11th, 2018. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be narrating his article, and I'll be including a link in the description if you ever wanted to read over that again, or share that with your friends, or check out his website. And I'll be also adding any commentary in between the narration as seen fit. So looking into the website here, just a quick rundown. Let's go ahead and start. If you're here reading this article, I'm assuming you're not one of my regular readers. You're someone who has come looking for information. You've just heard the term QAnon, maybe from a friend, from a relative, a post on social media, maybe a billboard on the roadside. Heck, by the time you're reading this, the mainstream media might even be talking about this mysterious individual only known to as QAnon. But regardless of where you first heard the name, you want to know more. And I wish I could help you, I really do, but the problem is if I just come out and say it, it's probably going to be really hard to believe anything I have to say, even if you are politically aligned with me. Why? Because the information Q presents requires such a dramatic paradigm shift, such a radical realignment of any and all presuppositions you had about the state of the world. Because it requires such a prerequisite level of knowledge to truly understand, it is often easier to just dismiss it outright and avoid any pesky cognitive dissonance that would otherwise emerge altogether. See, I myself, as well as my longtime readers, have had the benefit of having 8 whole months to digest 1,600 plus posts. Obviously, we've had more than 8 months, but at the time that was written, he's had 8 whole months to digest 1,600 plus posts that Q has given us over the same period. The sheer size and scope and depth of the information is hard to process in a day, let alone 8 months. If I just come out and say it, you probably won't believe me. And he goes on in saying that his goal isn't to try to convince you to believe him, but his goal is to explain what it is. And as you read down, we're going to go down to here, but don't be surprised if you feel a bit incredulous after reading this. And he's got a point, because there's so many moving parts to this, but it's just when you've been following this for so long and you see the things that Q posts and then it coming true, it's like, okay, you can only have so many strings of coincidences before you realize that it's not a coincidence. And so continuing, the world has long been held hostage by a group of power brokers I have collectively labeled the Cabal. They sit in seats of power around the world, making sure they control governments, wars, money flow, and even the lives of individuals like you and me. They see us as a disposable pawn, a sort of natural resource they can spend at will, and this Cabal seeks to grow and expand its power every single day through all sorts of subversive action, be it class strife, fomenting economic instability, or sending us to die in foreign lands under the guise of patriotism and duty. The Cabal is not entirely monolithic, but features many different branches. Despite this, they work together, and their goals are much the same: the destruction of the West by any and all means, and the creation of a global megastate. A large portion of the Cabal are members of the secret society that is little more than a Neo-Babylonian death cult, and the higher you advance in the cult, the more mutual blackmail is required of you. Does this not ring a bell with Epstein? See, with the whole Epstein situation, you had this guy who had all these high-profile people coming to his island, and you think it was just to have fun. You don't think that he was collecting blackmail on certain individuals. You already know from some of these cases from witness testimony that he had CDs, he had tapes and files of all these prominent politicians, businessmen, Hollywood actors and actresses doing these awful, vile things, all so that he can blackmail them to do what he needs them to do. And so the higher you go up, Neon Revolt is saying here in this article that he wrote, the higher they go up, the more of these vile things that they have to do so they can keep them in lock. And so what he's saying is, let's continue on. You see, the higher-ranking members want the ability to destroy the lower-ranking members at any time should they step out of line and attempt to challenge the authority of the higher-ranking members. This is achieved through several means, but recording individuals in honeypots and pedophilic acts and participation of human sacrifice are the primary ways in which this is achieved. And I know this sounds crazy and far-fetched, but just stay with me. That's not to say that this is done against the will of the individuals being blackmailed. Often they are willing participants in all of this and enjoy performing these kinds of evil deeds. Such is a face of depravity. Hillary and Obama are 2 such members of this cabal, and though they were high-ranking, they are not top dogs, and certainly not HRC's failed presidential run in 2016. That day cost them so much power and influence, they didn't even know what to do. Remember, Hillary didn't even give a concession speech that night. That was because they never expected her to lose. Together, and that's the thing, is when that's why I followed Q for so long. When I started following Q back in February 2017, February 2017, I believe. It was a little bit after the election, and I already kind of like I was following the Ukraine crisis and what was going on in Libya and with Iran and with Syria and all that, and I was following a lot of the stuff that they were doing, and I kind of already knew that this was in the bag. But I knew that she was going to win, and I was super surprised to see that Trump won. I was super thankful that he did, but I was not expecting that at all. And she didn't even give, as Neon Revolt pointed out, she didn't even give a concession speech when she lost, because she wasn't expecting to lose. And so together, as we've learned from the Q drops, they were plotting the complete destruction of the USA and Russia. And I don't mean that in some esoteric sense of empires collapsing, balkanizing, and coalescing into new states across time, like the murmurations of flocks and birds across the sky. No, I quite literally mean nuclear war, mass drought, disease, and food shortages. I'm talking roving death squads in the street. The goal was to wipe out two of the biggest threats to the cabal by making them fight each other and rule over a fragmented, atomized, neo-fascist global mega-state made of whatever was left over, mostly Europe, the Middle East, Africa. I don't know if I agree with him in that case, but I do know their whole point was globalization and making our country less sovereign. And so once you start participating in all these trade deals that are multilateral, not unilateral, you really run into sovereignty issues, because then one country can vote that you take or do certain things that goes against the will of the American people. And so when we saw the end of the TPP, that was my first sign that Trump was doing something good. And I was skeptical of Trump, but when we first went in, just like of any other president, but as soon as he was keeping the promises that he was making, that's when I went all in, basically. And he says, continuing, remember when I said, don't be surprised if you feel incredulous when reading this. And yet this is exactly what we've learned over the past 8 months of this writing by listening to Q. This in particular is something he's called the 16-year plan to destroy America. And when you start reading the Q drops, you come to understand what a Q drop is when Q, this individual who we'll explain who he is soon, he posts onto 8chan. It's a website. It's like a message board. It's anonymous, and so when he drops there, anybody can go to the website and check it out. We call it drops every time he posts it. So when you start reading the Q drops, you come to understand that this was exactly the cabal's plan for years, going back decades. Obama was a Manchurian president groomed from his youth as a subversive agent of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hillary. She's a literal practicing witch who once had 3 dining rooms named after her on Epstein's pedophile island, the same island where, until recently, stood a sacrificial temple to Babylonian fertility gods like Baal and Minerva. And I call them dining rooms because they weren't eating anything you'd find in a normal supermarket. No, these people are pedivores, and they are profoundly sick and twisted. Hey, I tried to warn you, this was going to be a hard red pill to swallow. What happens when you read Q is you quickly learn that almost everything you think you knew about the world is wrong. It's more than just wrong, it's a deliberate lie made to perpetuate the power of this cabal. And so Neon Revolt, when he wrote this, he did not realize that Epstein was going to become a household name. Last year in 2019 when they arrested Epstein, it was a huge confirmation from a lot of the people in the Q movement that this thing was actually pretty legit. And so continuing going on. And again, I'm not particularly interested in trying to convince you here, because at a certain point, undeniable proofs will make their way to the public, such as the photo. And this, I still haven't seen this, so to speak, but apparently there's a photo of Obama holding an AK-47 while dressed in full Muslim garb and shooting what Q calls red, white, and blue, but which is probably a person, not just a flag, though that last bit is just speculation on his part. Furthermore, Q lays out very clearly on how all these scandals like Uranium One again, which is true, like the Iran deal, like the Paris Accord, like the North Korea situation, all tie into the plans of the 16-year plan and to destroy America. And once you truly grasp what he is saying, you come to understand the sheer level of subversion and evil that has been hidden from Americans for many decades, and conversely, how great things can yet still become once this evil is purged from our lands. So there's so much to Q. It's hard to sum it up in one essay, as he says, and then he skips down to who is Q, and this is kind of to answer a lot of my listeners' questions here. Q originally posted on an image board known as 4chan starting back in October of 2017. Notably, so I started following Q on February 2018 then. So notably on the poll slash board, or the poll board, aka politically incorrect board, which was a major hub of operations during the Trump campaign, disseminating Trump memes at high velocity and directly influencing the election in very tangible ways. There was even an occasion when Trump himself came online and spoke to the Anons there, and that was a glorious day. And that is wild too. And check it out right here if you guys can see on the screen. So basically what happened is Trump had retweets one of these Pepe Frog accounts, and it was at 3 a.m. Eastern time, and an Anon says, "What the F is he doing up at 3 a.m.?" And then somebody tweeted, or not tweeted, but posted on 4chan, and he said, "I tweeted this to show I listen. This is the only post I will make." And the Anon was saying, "Holy cow, is this Donald Trump?" And so one of the Anons, an Anon is somebody who's on the anonymous messaging board. So one of the Anons goes and he writes, "Mr. Trump, if you actually do lurk here and you like this meme, please use the word amazing somehow in your next tweet on Twitter. This will be a wink and a nod on the download that you appreciate all of us here. Thank you." And then he says MAGA. And then the next day, Donald Trump posts, "Colorado was amazing yesterday. So much support. Our tax trade and energy reforms will bring great jobs to Colorado and the whole country." And so, I mean, again, this is the coincidence that I was telling you. There's and that's what they call a Q proof. There's so many coincidences that happen over and over and over. The next episode, if you guys will tune into that, is actually one of the most recent ones involving General Flynn, and it is that one alone is reason to believe in this stuff. But continuing on. And basically no one, he writes, in the mainstream media covered any of this. This is far from the only example of this kind of thing happening, but the important thing to remember is that this was happening during the election. And unless you were there on the boards, you didn't have any clue this kind of communication was happening. So why did Q select this platform? Because it was one of the last mediums of truly free speech online. Much like the news groups of a bygone internet age, 4chan was a rowdy, unruly bastion of free speech, organized by topic of interest, often referred to as the underbelly of the internet. Usually by those who don't understand the culture, anyone could come here and say exactly what they wanted, unlike on regulated, policed, and sanitized platforms like Facebook, Twitter, etc. And we are seeing so much more of that today. One of the posts or one of the pictures in the intro with all that media stuff that I played in the beginning of this episode was a post about how Twitter had removed 7,000 QAnon accounts, or accounts that were promoting QAnon and whatnot. And so that's why you see all these people from Twitter emigrating to that new social media website called Parler. This is exactly why Q started posting on 4chan when he first started, because no one was there to moderate it. Okay, I take that back. No one was there to censor them. There are moderators on the 4chan board because there are still rules. You still have to abide by certain rules, right? You can't like go on there and commit a crime, basically. And so but like Neon Revolt is saying though, 4chan was kind of like one of those places that you go that, no one's politically correct there. Very offensive language around there. I don't typically like to go to 4chan. I go to websites for Q that what they do is they pull the posts and they just bring it to the website, so you don't have to dig for them. I do lurk there a little bit, but I don't spend too much time there, and because there is a lot of like flagrant. It's just a lot of like stuff that you probably don't want to see. And then here we go. So anyone can post and speak their mind whenever they want. Because of this, you tend to get a crowd of people who not only have a thick skin, but have a certain kind of intellectual rigor not found among the general public. Everyone who posts on a chan is anonymous unless you choose to identify themselves, and therefore when going back and forth in conversation, users will refer to themselves as Anons. Because Q signed all his posts with Q, he became Q Anon. So hopefully that explains who Q is and why they call him Q Anon. And so after an initial wave of posts, an increasing curiosity from the community, opposing forces started to disrupt Q threads. Shilling increased dramatically, and it took such a turn that eventually it came out that all the moderators of the poll board had been compromised by the deep state, or the cabal that Neon Revolt calls them such, and that the platform itself was no longer suitable for Q to post any more drops. Working quickly, Q and his team migrated to 8chan, which, as you can imagine by the name, is very similar to 4chan. See, these kinds of image boards run on very similar software stacks, so it's relatively easy to start your own chan website that's similar to 4chan and 8chan. And so followers of Q quickly got their own board on 8chan, and Q had adopted a trip code, which is a way of preserving and verifying his identity, so that way you know that even though he's anonymous, that's still Q, and not someone else pretending to be Q. It would basically barred any moderator drama or minor technical speed bumps. But yeah, so a final word of caution about the chans. While you can go there and seek out the relevant keyboard for yourself, I wouldn't recommend it if you're brand new to all this. On top of them being purposefully hard to use in order to keep what they call normies out, which is people who don't go there, you might end up seeing things you might otherwise not wish to see. Remember how I said these platforms are free speech forums? That means that literally anyone can just post anything, and that means bad actors too, attempting to derail researchers with all manner of pornography, gore, shilling, and stuff like that. So if you're not a seasoned and somewhat desensitized to internet culture, you probably should walk away feeling you would probably walk away feeling a bit sick. So best to leave it to the weaponized, I don't know how to say that, who cannot filter this kind of stuff with ease and seek out information on other sites. So yeah, I would if you're going to follow Q, I'd rather go to qanon.pub or qmap.pub, and I believe there's qalerts.pub as well. So I would go there because it's actually a really good way to research all this. You can read the very first Q post to today, and I think there's thousands now. I think 4,000 we're at, or 3,000. I don't remember, but it's definitely more than 1,600 when this was written. And so he goes in and says, how does Q communicate? I'm assuming that if you're reading this, you've seen at least a few Q posts, even if you didn't fully understand what they mean, and that's fine. For our purposes right now, all you really need is a bare minimum of exposure to Q, and even if you don't have that, don't worry. That's coming later in the article. If Q is who he says he is, military intelligence, which for those who don't know is an intelligence agency akin to the FBI or CIA, only not corrupt, with a corrupt bureaucracy. This implies he has access to a ton of intel beyond what the average citizen has. This intel is of course classified and therefore is subject to all kinds of national security laws. However, this does not stop the average person from being able to make connections on their own, connections with which mirror what the intel has to say. This leads to a Socratic style of posting where Q will often present two or more seemingly separate topics and challenge us to see if we can establish a relationship between the two to connect, as he often says. This allows him to sidestep these laws and create a sort of crowdsourced narrative that is, at the very least, closer to the truth than anything has been reported by the mainstream media. We'll talk a relatively recent post of this writing and easy to understand Q drop as an example. So if you guys look down here, here's an example of a Q drop. Here's a Twitter post. So looking at the top down, so we see Q, we have his trip code, and then the date, time, and then this is a picture from Twitter, and then Q will post something below the picture. Sometimes there won't be a picture. Sometimes there'll be like a video. I mean, it depends what it is, but he'll say something like, logical thinking, why was the case against A1 filed under bank fraud? The result today is bank fraud. See last connect. The swamp is being drained. Q. And so Neon continues, these questions lead to a certain inevitable conclusion, such as Imran Awan squealed on all his criminal buddies during the case in order to defend himself. However, because many of the details used in his defense were previously classified, this created a situation known as gray mail, whereby previously classified intel has now entered the public record by way of criminal defense. Because of the situation, Q comes back to the next post and links to part of the legal code known as SIPA. This shows us that agencies, when confronted with the reality of gray mail, may then use that as legal grounds to basically declassify whatever they want. Furthermore, it was then uncovered that the plea deal struck by A1 does not apply to other attorneys such as Huber, implying that there is no way A1 is getting away with his crimes. And so, if memory serves me correctly, Huber is looking into potential, I believe, Clinton abuse, and then we have John Durham looking into the Russiagate abuse. So for the people who investigated Trump for the fake Russian collusion, we all know at this point it's a complete farce, and you don't even have to follow Q to know that. With all what's going on with General Flynn's case, what happened with Papadopoulos, and with what happened with those court cases, and finding out all the Brady evidence that they withheld, that could have freed Flynn from all of this crazy wrongful prosecution. And so furthermore, because Q is posting publicly, it attracts the attention of bad actors and so-called black hats, people who within the intelligence community and deep state, they do not have our best interests in mind. And so, yeah, he just continues to talk a little bit more about Q and whatnot. And, I mean, there's just so much to it. There's like layers and layers. Sometimes, like this right here is crazy. I didn't even make this connection. So sometimes when Q posts, he'll say something like a code, just individually, though. And then people would go back and just find these codes together, put them together. And this is about how this became a chess piece, basically, when you layered them all up, which I thought was pretty interesting. And so what is Q's goal? So Q's goal, simply stated, is to create a crowdsourced parallel construction for the general public to see and understand. And so this ties back to that welcome video I made for this channel talking about when we introduced General Flynn, about how the 2016 election was different. It was a revolution, especially in the sense of information, because the mainstream media was terribly against and one-sided against Trump in that sense, where people were on social media and on these message boards actually reporting news and what was really going on, that you can fact check and go back, and instead of relying on these bias, opinion, or op-ed pieces that are written on fake news websites like the Washington Post and the New York Times. So going further, that's just another point. Q doesn't. That's the thing, is like most people think that this is dangerous and they're a violent group, but there's only been a person or two that have done something crazy, and they're nothing but shills. Q does not condone that kind of violence. Q often says to trust the plan. That means let the good actors who are in these military agencies or in our government that are investigating corruption, let them do that, but spread the word, because a lot of this depends on public optics. And the thing is, like, a lot of people will say, like, how come they haven't arrested all these people? How come they haven't arrested all these people? Well, if the judge is corrupt, how are you going to prosecute anybody? And so Trump is playing this very long game where he has to shake the courts up first. He has to make sure these people are honorable. And so with that being said, we understand this is like a chess game where you can't. The timing is everything, and so are optics. You think that if you just arrested somebody like Hillary Clinton, that it's going to blow over? Like there's not going to be rioting, there's not going to be disorder. No, that wouldn't fare well for our society. But if you're able to expose these people first through like the Epstein case, then I think public opinion would switch, and at that point they can start making arrests. So yeah, timing is everything. And it's very strategic on how they plan all of this. But so yeah, his goal is to create this crowdsource construction for the general public to understand what's going on in this world. And like we're a group of citizen journalists that are working together with open source information to piece things together, and that's what I call. That's why my whole channel is called Rank and File, because we are the rank and file. We're not. We don't just depend on one single source. We work together. We don't say that we're the one source of news. We are the news, as in we all are the news in this generation. And so we all have to do our part. And so he goes on and he talks about how Q works with the NSA, and the NSA has for a while now sucked down every digital communication form conceivable. In other words, they already know who all the bad actors and criminals are. They already have all the evidence. The problem is none of it's usable. And why? It's because of legal doctrine known as the fruit of the poisonous tree. And so to add to his point, any evidence that's obtained in a illegal manner is going to be forfeited in a court. It will not be admissible whatsoever. So what they have to do is actually find evidence in a legal way. They just know where to look in particular. And lately, Q has taken to reminding us that we have the server over and over, a phrase which must put the fear of God in the hearts of the cabal. And he's referring to the DNC server that was allegedly hacked by the Russians. So no one is getting away here. The real problem Q faces is getting the general public on board, as actually it could be either that or Hillary's. I don't quite remember. It's either one of the two, but either one. It requires a complete narrative switch, and in order to do that, in order to usher in the Great Awakening, you have to systematically take down every single support structure those who profit off the cabal's narrative have put into place over the course of decades. So that includes politicians, that would include the media, that would include the banking cartels, big pharma. I mean, we just saw, and that's another point, we just saw Trump going after big pharma this past week. He's lowering the cost of prescription pills. And so now Big Pharma is weaponizing all these political ads against him. And he's going after and targeting criminal organizations. We're talking human trafficking. I mean, that's been a huge thing that his administration has been tackling. We're talking about CIA-operated nations and military bases. We're talking about the corrupt ones. We're talking about a systematic purge of evildoers from the face of the earth. So think about it from President Trump's perspective. If Hillary and Obama and so many others really are the criminals Q says they are, and you already have all the evidence you need, what would stop you from acting on it? And put simply, you would need to get the public on board. You would need to do it in a way that's publicly accessible to all and undeniable. And that's what I was talking about earlier. And so I think a lot of this is the Epstein thing, and I'm seeing, and the reason why I decided to make this channel, because at one point I did have a podcast with a friend, and I just felt like because of the 2020 elections coming up, I really feel like I needed to cover this. Now, of course, the quarantine has kind of, separated us, so I guess I just still wanted to do something about it, and so that's why I made Rank and File. And so, yes, we're going to see and are already starting to see bad actors purged from every area of government and media imaginable. You're going to see an increasing number of legal decisions eroding the cabal's power structure. For instance, Trump has been working at chipping away at Planned Parenthood funding through different avenues. Planned Parenthood is subsidized by the American taxpayer, charges for their services. On top of that, as a result, donates double digits, millions to cabal-affiliated politicians year after year. Trump is working on starving the beast. You can also look at the Supreme Court's recent ruling that allows government workers to opt out of the related union dues. Government unions function in the similar fashion to Planned Parenthood. I mean, if we look at today's climate with the coronavirus, I mean, Trump back in 2018, he signed a law, the right to try, and I know right now there's been a lot of controversy with the use of hydroxychloroquine for that one virus that, if I mention, would probably get this channel kicked off of YouTube. He's not saying that's the answer, but everyone should have the right to try an experimental drug for whatever disease that they're trying to treat. And I wonder if that was something that, you know, he I guess predicted would come to light, some crazy virus that we're living through in this day and age. So he goes on talking about, another example would be like the TPP, ending globalism, securing our border in the South, bringing manufacturing back to America and away from China, being strong on China, trying to stabilize peace between North and South Korea. These are all things that are necessarily wouldn't be what the cabal would want. And you guys can come down here and read the rest of this post about Q. I really feel that there's so many different YouTube channels you guys can find as well. There's so many. It's just really hard to find unless you were following these people before they start censoring them all. If you type QAnon, all you're gonna get is a bunch of fake news website or recommended videos from mainstream articles. You're not going to get these patriots who are trying to spread the truth about what's going on, about different perspectives to explore, and not being baby-fed news that may contradict what the mainstream narrative may be. So, and that's the other disclaimer I'll say as I end this, is that don't believe it because you're hearing it from me. Actually do the research, take a look into it, spend some time to learn about it. But I wouldn't overtly just dismiss it because it's complex. The next episode we're going to be making is going to be looking at the Q boards and talking about General Flynn again, because there is something what we call a Q proof, that it's just something that kind of proves the movement to be right. And I hope you've enjoyed this so far. Don't believe me in these things. Take a second look into them. And I want my listeners to know that I'll be willing to be wrong if this is not right. But I will say that this has been an overwhelmingly positive movement. In a sense, it has brought patriots and citizens of the United States and around the globe to focus on issues that we need to focus on, and unite each other under what I'd like to call a blanket of censorship from YouTube, from social media websites like Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and mainstream garbage that's just outright lies. And so, yeah, with that being said, this is your host, Leon. If you guys like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. Much appreciated for your listening, and especially if you made it this far into the show. Peace.